On today's show, is Justin Sourdif the long-term answer at that second-line center position, or will the Capitals go outside of the organization for more of a long-term fix? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the resiliency of Logan Thompson. In the previous game against the Lightning, I think it's easy to say that was not his finest hour. How did Logan Thompson bounce back against the Blue Jackets? And what does it say about Spencer Carbery having that level of confidence to put Thompson right back in there? A bit later, we'll talk about the blue line as it erupts. Jakob Chychrun scores 2 goals. Carlson scores a goal. Martin Fehervary scores a goal for a team that has struggled to score 5-on-5 at chunks throughout the season. It is reassuring that the Capitals have blue line offensive firepower. But just to get it going here, talking about Justin Sourdif and the big role that he has taken on with the Capitals this season. And to be clear here, a lot of surprise. Because going into this season, there was questions amongst fans and some beat writers. Was he even going to make the big team? I know what Chris Patrick said, that, they gave up 2 draft picks in order to acquire him and that he was going to be that guy on the 4th line. It was going to be Dowd at center, Dubois on the left, and Justin Sourdif on the right. And that was the script. And like I said, if you're an everydayer, if you're part of the everydayer club here, you know that I spoke about that, just because what we see in the preseason and the lineups, the line combinations to start the season, that to write it in pencil because things are, subject to change. And what changed? Pierre-Luc Dubois, the second line center for the Capitals, a big role. Nick Dowd, both of those players injured. And we know the role that PLD and Nick Dowd take on with this team, defensive, 2 of the best defensive centers on this team, that for a young guy, an unproven commodity in Justin Sourdif to take to that second line center position like a fish to water has been surprising, but in a good way. But the question that I have is he the long-term answer? Is it sustainable, what we have seen? Because his track record, his NHL odometer doesn't have a lot of miles on it, if you will. That this is a guy that's played primarily in the AHL, sip of coffee with the Panthers. But what we have seen thus far has been assuring, shall we say. So let's talk about what he's done so far. And talking about Sourdif, drafted 2020, 87th overall, 3rd round, 25th pick. That when you take a look at that, that's not eye-popping, right? That you look at that like, let's move heaven and earth to bring that guy to this team. But the thing of it is that Chris Patrick and the amateur team, they had their eyes set on him for quite some time, and that there were other teams that were all in as well. And there was a lot of question about why did the Capitals give up 2 draft picks? Well, what Chris Patrick has said is that other teams were already offering to give up 1 draft pick, that we were all in. We were laser focused on bringing Justin Sourdif in. So what has he meant for the Capitals and to take on such a big role? Let's talk about that here, because Justin Sourdif isn't filling time at the second line center position. He's legitimately pushing this team forward. that we have seen chemistry on that second line with Protas and Wilson. And honestly, it's becoming one of the biggest storylines of this month. And you look at why this matters, and it starts with opportunity. Because honestly, he only gets this role because Pierre-Luc Dubois and Nick Dowd go down. And what do we know? Well, Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be out for 3 to 4 months. That, I think that, it was worth a shot. And Spencer Carbery liked what he saw with sort of at center. But things change because, you saw him, playing the third line center. But then Nick Dowd goes out and you're like, wow, let's try this and see if it works. And well, it has. And most young guys in that spot just try not to mess things up. They don't want to shake up the snow globe too much, but sort of didn't just avoid mistakes. He has elevated everything around him. And what has he done? He's winning draws in key spots. He's controlling pucks down low like a veteran, like he belongs. And he's breaking pucks out with confidence. And he's definitely put himself in a good spot, even when Dowd does come back, even when PLD comes back, that I expect him to maintain a center role. He's reading plays at a speed that you usually don't see from a guy at his age, who's just been dropped into a major role. The analytics, well, they speak for it as well. He's among the team leaders in expected goals and high danger creation since early November. And, that's not luck. That's repeatable play driving. And ultimately, why the Capitals very well might continue to keep him in there at that second line center position. There was questions about, well, Ilya Protas get a look. He still very well may. And will the Capitals go outside of the organization for more of a long-term fix, a proven score? Because, like I said, Justin Sourdif has played well, but for how long? Is it sustainable? That is the big question. And then you hear from the locker room, guys vouch for him. Tom Wilson raves about him and his motor and how he's able to move. And, I don't think that Tom Wilson is someone that's easily impressed. They talk about how he opens space and how he thinks about the game and how he's not afraid to play in the heavy areas. And you see that play, the kind of whip around pass in the last game that ultimately ends with a Tom Wilson goal. And you're like, yeah, this guy's really good. And that's the kind of praise, that Tom Wilson heaps out only when you've earned trust. And the good thing about it is, as well, is that gives Spencer Carbery options that he didn't have earlier in the season. He can roll the top nine more evenly. He can match Sourdif's line against tougher competition without hesitation. Like, is this going to work? Coin flip, 50-50, yes or no. I think that Spencer Carbery feels confident in putting Sourdif out there. And he can use the third line for situational shifts rather than sheltering them. And it trickles down the lineup. The top line gets more favorable moments, of course. The checking line gets more structure. And the fourth line gets cleaner deployments. So, yeah, the biggest takeaway is that Sourdif isn't a temporary patch, in my belief. That I think that until he does something to prove otherwise, he's the guy. He's playing like someone who wants that job long term. And again, it's all about, it's not about the guy that's been here the longest or the track record. It's ultimately who Chris Patrick knew that Justin Sourdif is. He's playing like someone who wants that job long term. He's shifting the identity of the middle six. And if he keeps doing this, the Caps suddenly have center depth they didn't expect this early in the season. So what's reassuring is that Sourdif has fit the bill, right? And it's also reassuring that guys like Ilya Protas down in Hershey have done a great job. So say for some reason it doesn't work, say it's not sustainable, that maybe they don't have to get crazy and, just go totally nuclear here and, trade a bunch of draft picks and, young players and roster players to get this guy that might have chemistry with this team. That I feel confident that Sourdif is the guy. And until he does something to prove differently, I think you should too. And it's a good thing, because, I mean, the Capitals, and you take a look at the standings here because that's what it's all about. The Capitals playing well. It wasn't long ago that they were in last place in the Metro. Where are they now currently? They are in fourth place in the Metro with 26 points. The Islanders with 28. They definitely could overcome them. The Devils 29 and the Hurricanes with 30. But it's tight, folks. The Capitals 26 points, Penguins 25, Flyers 25, Blue Jackets 25, and the Rangers 24. They've got to keep their foot on the gas, and they're going to be able to continue to get success with the likes of Justin Sourdif in the mix. He's the real deal for me right here, right now. I think that we should all be bought in on what Justin Sourdif brings to this team. Is there the chance that he could fall on his face? For sure, but that's true for anybody. But as of right now, the Capitals have an excellent option in Justin Sourdif, and I expect his game to continue to get better. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Logan Thompson's fast reset. That I think it would have been an easy thing for Spencer Carbery to go, Logan Thompson struggled in the last game. Why don't we go with Chucky Lindgren? Not the case. It was a vote of confidence that Spencer Carbery pushed his chips in on Logan Thompson. What does that mean for Logan Thompson? And what does that say about the confidence of Spencer Carbery? I'll break it all down straight ahead. Let's be honest, most of us can't name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without ever having to touch a dreaded spreadsheet. It helped me see where I was spending my money wisely on retirement and not so wisely on sports memorabilia and eating out. That's why I love Monarch, and I know that you will love it as well. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I want to thank all of you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment here, we're talking all things LT, Logan Thompson, and how there was a quick bounce back, that, the Capitals stumbled and they fell against the Lightning. And, you could point to, hey, that Logan Thompson guy, he's the one that put the Capitals in this position. And it would have been easy for Spencer Carbery to say, hey, maybe this guy just needs some time to cool off, clear his head out a little bit, but not the case. In the last game against the Blue Jackets, he was back in, he was dominant, he looked like he didn't miss a step. For me, it's absolutely huge that the head coach, Spencer Carbery, had no reluctance to put him right back in the mix. That, it's not just because a player, fell apart, a netminder, that, all of a sudden that there's this goalie controversy. Not the case. That Logan Thompson still is the guy, a guy that was in the talk of Vezina last season, has been really good this season, that I think it speaks volumes about how quickly Logan Thompson was able to bounce back. But even bigger picture for me, the confidence that Spencer Carbery has in Logan Thompson. So let's talk about that in the second segment here. And the bounce back after the Tampa meltdown tells us this team is not dealing with a goalie crisis. Put away your panic button. They're dealing with a goalie who's mentally strong enough to flush a bad night instantly. So let's walk through this. Let's walk through the ugly game against Tampa. Thompson gives up 4 goals on 6 shots. A disaster. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. He gets pulled, and honestly, that could have shaken him. Oftentimes in that case, They struggle in multiple outings, but it speaks of the mental toughness of Logan Thompson. A lot of young goalies take a week or two to get the rhythm back after a game like that. Not Logan Thompson. He is dialed in, and he understands that I'm going to have a bad outing here or there. But then 2 nights later, back in the net, he's calm, he's precise, he posts 22 saves on 23 shots. Quite the performance. And the team wins comfortably. And that's the definition of mental resilience. And I still think that ultimately the Capitals play that much more confidently in front of Logan Thompson. That's the ability every good starter needs. You can't be a great guy in the NHL if one ugly night lives rent-free in your head. His comments after the game matter too. He owned the Tampa Bay game, didn't make excuses, didn't deflect blame. And that's tough, right? Because I think, in fact, I know it's hard to internalize. I do this job. I have a 9 to 5, and sometimes people are critical. Sometimes my bosses are critical. And I think that it's easy to say, well, if but for, I would have been better. Not me, them, right? That Logan Thompson was able to internalize and go, you're right. It was not a great game for me, and I've got to be better to help this team win games. And that speaks volumes about the maturity of Logan Thompson, that you didn't make excuses. He didn't deflect. He basically said, bad game, move on. And you could tell that he actually did move on. And for this team, this is huge. I think he's fully invested in the Capitals winning games. It's not the LT show for Logan Thompson. It's about, how is this team doing? I'm going to do my level best to give the Capitals the best shot at winning games. When your goalie resets that quickly, it stabilizes everything in front of him. Defensemen stop overplaying. Forwards can attack with confidence. And ultimately, the bench relaxes because they know the guy behind him isn't spiraling, some head case. But let's be honest here. This season was always going to be about managing the goalie rotation. There was a question about, is it going to be like last year, where it's LT, Chucky, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? But the Capitals have leaned more heavily into Logan Thompson. And ultimately, I think the right idea. You want to put your best goalie out there to give you the best chance at winning on any given night. And for the Capitals, it's Logan Thompson. That's not a knock on Chucky Lindgren. He's a really great option as well. But you want the guy that's going to give you the best chance at winning. And also, on back-to-backs. And Lord knows the Capitals have played a lot of back-to-backs this season. That when you have a guy like Chucky, right there, ready to step in if called upon, that is why I think the Capitals have one of the best tandems in the entire National Hockey League. And Thompson showing that bounce back ability tells the coaching staff he's reliable emotionally and technically. So the takeaway is clear. Not only is LT fine, he showed something that good teams need from their goaltenders. If that becomes his calling card, the Caps are in a much better position. That he is emotionally tough, that he has that resiliency, that he's emotionally and technically sound, that the Capitals are in a much better position than many people think. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the blue line erupts, and just at the right time. As the Capitals have struggled to score goals, it is reassuring that the blue line knows how to fire back. How are they getting it done? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who'll score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So whether you're a fan of the Wizards or any team in the NBA, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below, and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. Get text messages about all the news surrounding the Capitals in the form of a text message from yours truly. There's more information in the show notes. So in the final segment here, we're talking about the blue line as it blew up in the last game against Columbus, and that is what we need. I don't want to be reliant on the blue line to do all the scoring. Let them be defenders. Let them stop the opposing puck. But when they get involved in the rush and they can find the back of the net when maybe the forwards can't, that is the depth, and that gives you options in offense that some teams don't have. So let's talk about that in the final segment of today's show. And the Washington's defense is evolving into a full-blown offensive engine. Chychrun, Carlson, Fehervary all find twine in the game. But that Chychrun-Carlson record-setting sequence, this blue line is becoming a legitimate scoring threat on any given night. And let's start with the man himself, Jakob Chychrun, because, well, he's on a heater. This guy has been ridiculous lately. 2 more goals. Point streak hits 8 games. He's jumping into the rush confidently. And, you know, the Capitals have been in and were in on him multiple times. And, you know, that he was the one that got away when he went to Ottawa. But then, you know, Brian McClellan did the thing and brought him here. A big piece. And that was one of the moments I had no doubt that he was the guy, and he's proving that he is the guy. But the thing of it is, as he's jumping into the rush confidently, he's finding lanes like a winger. But he's doing it with smart timing and not reckless pinching. That is the huge difference. He's turning into that exact version of Chychrun that the Capitals hoped that they were getting. The smooth skating, the shot threat, the guy who tilts the ice offensively even from the back end. And the Capitals have had defenders like that before. Mike Green comes to mind, for example, as a guy that chipped in offensively. But, you know, we get the highlight moment. Chychrun scores, Carlson scores, and suddenly they've combined for the fastest consecutive goals by defensemen in franchise history. That's not some random fluke. That's chemistry. That's systems execution. You take 2 veteran defenders who now know how to shoot the puck. They know how to find the back of the net, and all of a sudden you have a really great 1-2 combo offensively from the blue line. That's too high a hockey IQ defensemen reading the same opportunity at the same moment, and Carlson being involved matters more than people realize. He's the steady leader on the blue line, the minute monster, the player, the defender, number 74, who could be, you know, playing his last year as a Capital. We don't know, right? That he's in a contract year. And he knows when to activate, you know, a steady pillar on the blue line defensively, but also sound offensively. He knows when to hold, and he knows when to jump. It gives everyone permission to push. Opponents now have a problem. They can't just key on Ovechkin's line. They can't just stop the forecheck. They have to worry about defensemen stepping in and scoring, and that is the double threat. I'm talking Chychrun and Carlson that are turning into, like I said, a good 1-2 punch. And what does that do? It stretches defensive zones. It forces teams to overload coverage. It opens up space for everyone. And that's why this is such a big development. You know, and like I talked about sustainability in the first segment with Sourdif, you know, can Chychrun keep it going? Can Carlson keep it going? All of a sudden, this team looks a whole lot more deep, and their offense looks that much better. The Caps haven't consistently had this level of blue line scoring in recent years. Now they have multiple defensemen heating up at once, and it turns this team into dangerous and unpredictable. It's not just OV anymore. that, you can get goal scoring from a lot of different sources. So yeah, the biggest takeaway here is simple. This isn't random. And I don't think that this is just noise. The Capitals' blue line is becoming a real offensive weapon. And that's the kind of dimension that can flip games. And that's the kind of things that can flip seasons. Because like I talked about off the top there, the Capitals were down and out not long ago. Help, get us out of the cellar, anything to in a pretty good position. But it's tight. It's really tight. We're coming at the Thanksgiving break here, and that's the measuring stick. And I got to say, the Capitals are in a much better position now currently than they were just a week or so ago. And for me, that's reassuring. But can they keep building on this success? That is one of the things that I want to key in on here. At this interesting juncture of the season, can they keep going? The Jets on deck here. And that's what you have to do. Like Davey Martinez of the Nationals said, try to go 1-0 every day for the Capitals. That's what they want to do. Don't look too far down the football field or the ice, if you will. Try to go 1-0 every day and try to just do your level best to win each and every game without worrying about what lies down the road. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. Now for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night every game, every night. Until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned, get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.